Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and here as my special guest host with me all season, covering this wonderful, classic, historic live album, because he asked me to do it, Dave White. Dave, how are you?
Hey, Scott. I'm fine. How are you? I'm back again.
Yes. Can you believe that we're almost through this album? We're down to the last 3 tracks.
Getting down to the end. I know this is good. This is good. Actually, it's kind of bittersweet. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, for sure. But I think I'm wrong, because the actual album ended with Love Machine, didn't it? And then it was the expanded edition that added the medley?
Right. The expanded edition did that stuff. Yep.
And of course, we do the expanded editions on the show to encompass everything that we possibly can, as reasonable or unreasonable as it's been for the last year and a half. But that's how the show works. So I want to talk to you. Well, first, I have to tell you, I learned something today. And, at my age, I feel like I don't learn something every day anymore. But I learned if I want to cross something off of my to-do list very quickly, all I have to do is write it down in a way that I can't read it, and had no idea what I was supposed to do.
That works. I've done that for years.
I have one that I stared at several times today, and I have no clue what it meant. So I finally just crossed it off, and I felt accomplished.
That works. That perfectly is making sense to me. I do that all the time. Sometimes by accident, sometimes knowing I'm going to do that. So, yeah, that's one way to get rid of stuff.
People come to the show for the music review, but I also want to be educational. I want to help people live better lives. And there you go.
Okay, well, that's very commendable and admirable on your behalf. Admirable on your part, but I don't know how I get it.
Yeah. Well, I just made your lives 10% more productive, so you're welcome. Now, before we get into today's song, because this is going to be a super short song, it's only 1 minute and 45 seconds, which is really ironic because it's one of the longest songs that the band recorded. But I want to talk to you guys, while I've got Dave here with me, I want to talk to you guys about the 2 websites that are Uriah Heep related that he has done countless hours putting together and maintaining and updating. They're beautiful sites. Let's start with the band's main site, uriah-heep.com. You just hit your 25th anniversary since you began the site.
The site has had the official uriah-heep.com name. I think it's April 14th, 1997. Before that, the site existed, but it wasn't called uriah-heep.com. It was called something else. I can't remember what it was called. And we, back then, when the internet was like fairly brand new, I'll tell you, one of the things that never stops going around is when you meet someone that you don't know their history of being a fan of Uriah Heep on the internet. You find out that I got a computer, and the first thing I did was punch up Uriah Heep. I hear that all the time. I've heard that for 25 years. Mm-hmm. First thing I did was go on Google. I punched up Uriah Heep. Before Google, there was Yahoo. Before that, there was something else. The bulletin boards, Mm-hmm. So we're all kind of in the same club. We're like the I Searched for Uriah Heep club. And back then, there were resources for Uriah Heep, but it wasn't the quote-unquote official Uriah Heep source. There were people who had Uriah Heep websites. There were bunches of them. And we sort of started to get to know each other. Emails and people clicking on those sites and contact, click on this for a contact name. You write the guy who runs the site and you find out it's so-and-so in Ohio, or so-and-so in Chicago, or so-and-so in France. It's, And we got to know each other, and they knew people, and we knew people, and this thing geometrically grew. This is about 1995-ish, I get it. And there were, Uriah Heep clubs all over the planet, but they weren't internet clubs, although they did migrate to the internet somewhat. But the Uriah Heep Appreciation Society was long before the website that was out.
Mm-hmm.
And I became, a member of that and a fan of that. We all these people, when I say we all, this group of Uriah Heep fans who became Uriah Heep fans on the internet later on. One of those guys I hooked up with had a site in Singapore, of all places. And it was called the Uriah Heep homepage. So I began to talk to him, and I was completely blown away by the internet, by the whole idea of the internet. And back then, in my office, I had 4 computers, and we did all kinds of stuff for the business, but one of my computers I dedicated to the internet. So, not that I'm saying I played all day long, but most of the time, I was always trying to do something, on the net. And my main subject focus was Uriah Heep. I just couldn't believe that they were actually mentioned somewhere. But little did I know, overseas, they were pretty big. But they weren't big where I was. And I'm in Ohio, and I was in Ohio back then. So I hooked up with this guy in Singapore, and I learned how to make web pages. I would contribute some I got a server going, and so forth and so on. And I'd make some pages, and I'd contribute my pages to his site. So he'd link over to me, I'd link over to him, and we kind of built a bigger site than he had. And then we met more people, and and people started to contact he and I separately. And then we started some groups online, and so forth and so on. And I met a whole bunch of people. We probably had 50 people, 60 people I regularly was in contact with. But all of us were regularly in contact with all of us. So it was a pretty fun thing to do. And about 1996 or so, I started to look into the possibility of what exactly do I have to do to make up a name for the band. So I said, I want to call it Uriah-Heep.com. That made sense to me. So I asked 10 of these people that I had became very close with as internet pals. Now we call them friends on Facebook, but when they were we're just internet guys and gals. And I said, I'm going to start a website that's different than what we have. I'm actually going to give it a name. So do you guys want to contribute to the founding of the name? And I think to get the name was like $500 or $300 or something. Now it's like $12, but then it was rather expensive. Mm-hmm. And the cost to run them was rather expensive. I didn't want them to chip in to run it or to pay for it. I wanted to give them the opportunity to present the band with the domain name with me, because I was going to do it, whether or not they were in it or not. And every single person said absolutely. So they were sending me checks from all of them, somewhere in Germany, somewhere in the States, some Brazil. I mean, they were everywhere. And I bought the name. And then I hooked up the existing website that never had a name to this new name. Bingo, there's UriahHeep.com. And it took about, 3 or 4 months to get on the search engines, whatever they were. There was Alta Vista. Google wasn't even around yet.
Right, yeah.
And I had a plaque made up at this place that I was doing business with from my other job, from my real job. I had a plaque made up, and it was like I had a logo in the brush script font, which actually is the Live 73 font. And I said, presented to Uriah Heep on April 14, 1997, in appreciation of 25 years of you guys, whatever, I can't read it, 25 years of you and wonderful music, Uriah-Heep.com, which interestingly enough was 25 years into the band's 50 years. I didn't, of course, know that then.
Right.
Turns out this is my 25th year, and this is now their 52nd year. So if anyone's listening, there were people who contributed. Was Alex Gitlin, Alan Keatley, Jesse Lowe, Haney So, Max Stiegel, Richard Wagner, Rodrigo Wernick, me, a girl named Lynn Weinted, and Bob Wentworth. We called ourselves the Heapsters on the web. And I had a nice wood plaque made up, and I sent it to Mick. I had met him online. Hadn't met him in person yet, but I met him online. I sent this to his house. He gave me his address. And he wrote back and he says, this is lovely, this is lovely. I don't know what to do with it, but it's lovely. And I said, don't do anything with it. It's our gift to you. You now have a presence on the internet called Uriah-Heep.com. We're going to run with it and enjoy. And that's all it was. So I took my fortunate chance to now own this thing because I was the web guy. I wasn't asking them to help me, although a couple of them did. But we just started the website full blast, and I spent a lot of my time at work on the net after hours, before hours, during hours when I could. So we built it up. And it went through 4 or 5 or 6 iterations of what it looks like now. It went through 4 or 5 management changes. And as Mick will test, management got the website when they got the band. And we were really one of the first websites for bands out there that was legitimately, officially known as website. So that's how it started.
Now, I wasn't into programming web pages back then. I didn't know anything about it. I was busy playing Risk across the world, taking my one turn a day on a bulletin board. Would this be like HTML programming, or was it something different that you were using?
It started as HTML programming,
okay.
Sure. As I evolved as a web guy, as a web administrator, I learned different languages, so I utilized them as I learned them. So the current site that when you go to Uriah-Heep.com, I put a different front end on it now because of our new management. They asked for some things that I didn't have on the old site. And I don't feel like rearranging 1,500 pages of legacy websites.
Right.
Because that's what we've got. It's 20 when H. Trump came on board and his crew, that was 20 years in. So we probably got almost 2,000 pages out there. And some of them look different because we would not always update every page when I made a change to the way the site was themed. So a lot of the stuff looks different than a lot of the stuff. But the main thing is that there's about 1,500 or 2,000 web pages, and they're programmed in HTML and PHP, .NET. There's databases, there's all kinds of stuff. I was using SQL for some of the things that I was doing. And I had people that were doing it with me. One guy was in Holland, Benedict Lewis, and kind of Rodrigo Wernick was in Brazil. And as time went on, there were changes made. Now it's just me, basically. But I'm hooked up with some really cool people who do a lot of their own stuff that I link out to. Like Tapio McKinnon has the complete, what I consider to be the official discography pages. He has everything that you ever needed to know about anything anybody ever wrote, or any songs they did or albums they did or anything. He's got all that locked up. So I just link out to his stuff, because it's perfect. And we're on good terms with each other, and we talk to each other. Our historian, the gentleman Takos, who's in Greece, and he was working with Lewis with the chronological order or the chronology of all the live dates the band ever did. And Lewis left the site due to health reasons. And I think he was running it up till about 2015, and then he backed out. So that part hasn't been updated. But we really have all the gigs listed from about 1971 through 2015.
Got to be quite a list. I mean, this is a hard-working band.
There's videos. There's more than everything else. It's just a list of the location, the date, sometimes the song list, the lineup. Sometimes if it changes or somebody has stepped in for a song or something. It's really well put together, and we used to have ticket stubs out there, all kinds of things, and it's changed. It's changed in its direction now. We're trying to be a little bit more professional and not so homegrown appearing.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that bothers me, but I'm trying to help the band with their thrust now.
Sure.
You know, they want things to happen. So now we're hooked into LinkedIn. We're hooked into not LinkedIn. We're hooked into YouTube. We have Twitter accounts. We have everything they ever did is on YouTube somewhere. We have Instagram. We have all kinds of different outlets for things. Facebook, of course. And the more that we figure out what we want to do, the more I'll do with them. So that's how it started 25 years ago. Just like, hey, whatever happened to Uriah Heep? It's the first thing I ever looked up on the internet. I think what I said, does anybody know what happened to David Byron and Uriah Heep?
Wow.
This was on a Beatles bulletin board.
Oh, wow.
They answered me, and they gave me a place to look. And that's how I found my first contact. Whoever that was, I don't remember who that was. So, I've been paying for it since day one. The band's totally appreciative. Not that expensive. I love doing it. And I hope, at one point we had a counter on our opening, on our homepage, the opening page. And when it got to 100,000, we had a big celebration, with all the people that were involved. When I got to 1 million, that was even a bigger celebration, but shorter lived because things were moving faster. Didn't have time to dwell on it. When I got to 5 million, I took the counter down. So that was just on the first page.
Right. Yeah.
Site. So if you Google Uriah Heep, you're going to get Uriah-Heep.com. That's the official way. Google recognizes that.
The first thing that comes up when I Google Uriah Heep. And it's such an incredible resource. I mean, yes, there are a ton of pages. There's so much to see. I mean, you could spend weeks there and still not see everything, but it's a beautifully done site. You update it frequently. When the new box sets come out, there's immediately pictures up. The store's there, so you can buy Uriah Heep merchandise. You can buy the music. It's comprehensive. The whole history of the band is there. It's an incredibly well done site. And I could say personally, it has been a great resource for me for putting the podcast together, especially just with creating all the web pages for my site that I needed to, because I've got a page for every episode. So yeah, I greatly appreciate all the work that you've done. And I have to say, I remember when the internet was really first getting started. I remember having the bulletin boards, but I just remember whatever the first search engine was that I latched onto, whether it was a GeoCities or Alta Vista, I cannot remember. But I remember the first thing I did when I got on was look up like my top favorite bands and found almost nothing because there was just no data yet.
I know. And that pretty much that's what everyone did. There was a program called Powwow. Powwow. Now you do it on your phone with videos and so forth. We used to hook up and have Uriah Heep meetings, like Powwow meetings. 50 people. They would all be typing in stuff and playing music and showing pictures of things and all kinds of stuff. And the person that started the particular meeting, if his computer shut off, went down, then Powwow ended.
Right.
That's what we did back then. We had those kinds of things. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the two people that were primarily involved with me for a while. So I have to do that. So Louis Rentrop, who was suffering from Parkinson's, that's why he backed out, was a huge contributor to the site for a long time. And we wish him the very best. I'm very fond of him. Band all knows and so forth and so on. But he lives in Holland and did a great job with me. Good ideas. Took on a lot of the load back then. And then Rodrigo Warnick, who lives in Brazil, who actually was Ken Hensley's webmaster when he started on the internet. Same thing as me, except he did it with Ken and with us at the same time. And if you know the history of Uriah Heep, there was a point at which, Ken wasn't in favor with the rest of the current band, right? So Rod was with us, which was great because he was very energetic and did his stuff. And Ken, that's how I met Ken, was through Rodrigo. And I don't know how Mick approached any of that. I never really talked to him about it, but that's how close we all were. So Rod knew what we were doing. We knew what he was doing. The band knew what he was doing. He knew what the band was doing. Everything was all, and the more the internet got open, the less secrets you could have, or the less things that you wanted to be kind of, hush hush about a new album coming out or anything. But we all had our roles to play, and by and large, it was all about the band. It was all about Uriah Heep.
Oh, yeah.
Just UriahHeep.com. That's where all our energies went.
Well, and just to prove the point, I just did a Google search for Uriah Heep, and the first page that comes up is uriah-heep.com. The second entry is the band's Wikipedia page. So when you're beating out Wikipedia, you know you're doing good. And the third entry is about the book David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. So you even beat out Charles Dickens. But interestingly, the search stats are 4.6 million results in 0.72 seconds when I typed in Uriah Heep. That's a lot of related results. Of course, some of those are going to be to the Charles Dickens character. But, thinking about the times that you and I are talking about, that early to mid 90s phase, if you got 3, that was like you hit a jackpot.
It's kind of on the website sort of now, but there's a listing. I think I stopped at 60. We had 60 friends' websites. So all these people like me who didn't make it official but wanted to promote the band and were happy about the band and being on the internet started their own websites. So I knew of 60 of them that we used to link out to. And back then, I don't know if it's still the same way. I'm sure it is, but it's kind of different now. But the algorithms that Google used then, the more sites that linked to you, the higher you were in the ratings. So as more of these websites came on board, the web proliferated through the term Uriah Heep and the associated tags and hashtags and things. Those 60 sites became very valuable, as we were for them also. Mm-hmm. We had all the hits compared to them. So they liked having us link out to them, and I liked having them link to us. But there were 60 people I knew who had websites at one time.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, people just love to do it. And we'll have the same pictures. If somebody got a new picture, they tell us about it, so we'd all share the picture around. I mean, it was really, really, really fun back then. Now it's more business because I'm older and the band's older. Things have changed around somewhat. But in the fledgling beginning of the internet, Uriah Heep was on there about as early as anybody else.
That's pretty awesome. And you were working with the guy Rodrigo doing Ken's site. It probably makes it a little bit easier for you because you also run mick-box.net.
I run the site too. That's been through a few names. That was Mixbox, mickbox.com, mickbox.net, mick-box.net. I'm not sure why I changed them. The site's been in HTML, ASP, ASP.net, PHP, and something else. I mean, and I've had that one running. I used to have a site for all the band members. Mm-hmm. And one by one, I had one for Trevor, I had one for Lee, I had one for Mick, I had one for C. I didn't have one for Phil, but I had them for most of them. And Mick's the one I stayed with. The rest of them didn't seem to be too hip on it. I wasn't going to spend time doing it. They didn't really want it.
Right.
Mick jumped all over it. So I started his way back about, say 2005 or something. So that's been out there a long time.
Wow. And what, obviously it's all about Mick Box, but what is it that we can find on that site that differs from what's on the Uriah Heep site?
Before that site, Mick used to send me pictures, like hundreds of pictures. I would keep them. I had another site name before there was MickBox.anything. But I just put his picture on it. He'd send me emails. He'd send me files. It was a lot of work. So when I started his site, one of the main things we did was post his pictures. There must be 2,000 pictures of Mick and his family and Mick and his career up on the site right now. And we search on Indexable. You'll get a listing of all the songs he's ever had a part in. You get a listing of, everything that he wants to be on his presence on the internet. So if there's interviews and stories, you'll find it from Mick, or videos all over the place of things that he's of YouTube video interviews, podcast interviews. Your stuff is up there. Have listings of all the releases when BMG or he does a release, and they want to show Mick showcasing something that goes on there. So there's a lot of stuff. And most of it, I'll mix guitars, some of his gear. And I've had, 3 different sites for him. So I tried to aggregate them all together. But this current one, I think, is probably going to be the one that ends up being the last one. Because it's got everything that he ever wanted on it, and he's happy with it. So if he's happy, I'm happy.
Right, because he has done stuff outside of Uriah Heep. I mean, he hasn't been in any other bands besides Spice of note, but he's done sessions. He's played on people's stuff before. Right. He
was even in a movie with John Lawton called Love.net. And so we had clips of that movie out there. I don't know if it ever happened to that, but John Lawton had a part in that movie. Mick had a part in that movie. He found police stuff. According to David Byron, of course, that were outside Uriah Heep, David Byron.
Yeah, I think he did a solo on one of David's songs, didn't he, on a David Byron album?
So all that stuff's been out there.
Yeah.
I try to keep it as current as Mick wants to keep it. Obviously, we can't change things every day. And with the pandemic, everything's slowed. So I've got kind of a breather. Mick's gotten kind of a breather. But when I loaded this one up, we spent about 3 weeks emailing back and forth every day. It was so much simpler now to upload things and position things than it was when I was manually, back in the beginning. So now it's a joy. He sends something over. 5 minutes later, it's up there, a piece of cake, and he's happy and I'm happy. A lot of pictures of Sheila and his son Romeo and his son Mike. So good stuff, family stuff. He's been very supportive, and as long as he's good with it, great. All works for me.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for all the effort over the years that you've put into that. It's been, like I said, a completely valuable resource for me, let alone your other millions of people that have visited the site probably multiple times. There's just so much on both sites to enjoy. So go check those out, folks. The links are always in the show notes for those. And thank you, Dave. You have really built something pretty phenomenal, I would say, on both of those sites.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Now, let's get into today's song. Like I said, ironically, this is the shortest song on the live album, and it's one of the longest songs that the band recorded. This is The Magician's Birthday. Now, of course, I have not listened to this yet, but I was speculating before we started recording that out of the 1:45 that is the track time for this, probably about 20 seconds is crowd noise. So we're really looking at like 1:25 or so for the actual song.
I'll tell you, I haven't listened to the original probably 5 or 6 years.
Really?
So I don't even know what that sounds like anymore. I only remember this one now. So I'm just going to enjoy it. You can be amazed how different it is from everything.
Is it not one of your favorites then?
Oh, no. This one I listened to. The original one I haven't heard in ages. I've heard it live, but I haven't heard the recording of it like forever.
I can tell you the first time that I saw Heep live here in Vegas, I was really excited when they started playing the song, and I thought they're not going to do the whole thing. They did the whole thing, the whole song. And I was just delighted the whole time because I never even thought, I didn't look at the set list. I wanted to be very surprised by what I saw as it happened. And I was just completely thrilled when they did the song, and they did just a blistering version of it. There's a spot where it's just Mick and Russell, and that I could have listened to that for another half an hour.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing live. Absolutely.
It is. Well, let's take a look at take a listen, I should say, to what the live version here is all about.
All right, let's go.
Got some more? Well, that's the nicest return to Birmingham we've ever had. I want to thank you for it. Really. I'm going to play you a little song. I'm going to play you a little song, see if you recognise this one.
Okay, so we're looking at 30 seconds before the song even starts.
Build it up.
Yeah, that's just funny to me. But you could tell right from where they're starting that they're just going to do the happy birthday sequence of the song and not the whole Magician's Birthday song. That would be impossible. I like what Gary's playing here. He's playing kind of off the beat in almost a reggae style.
Pretty cool. Yeah. This is the Magician's Podcast birthday song.
That's right.
That's right.
Although we're kind of halfway around the year for that, it would be, what would it be? I think the first episode was late November. So, we're recording this here at the beginning of April. So, we're a little ways away from that. But it's always fitting to have a birthday song. What is David Byron doing here? I think he's being an instrument.
No, I think that's leading the background.
Oh, is it?
That's what you're referring to.
That stuff?
Yeah, it's Lee Kerslake.
Okay, it sounded like David's mic position, but they could have Lee in the same spot. So David's doing nothing?
Back up and do it.
Because it sounds like Ken's doing the lead.
Ken is doing the lead.
Okay, well, we'll see where it goes.
That's one of those things I just remember listening to this going, oh, piece of cake. It sounds so normal to me. I never really thought about it. I think Ken started it.
Mm-hmm.
I think David singing the words "Happy Birthday." I think the part on the left that had the kazoo in it, and Ken is doing another harmony thing, sort of on the right with the organ. But I never really thought about it. It just all made sense to me. So I've always liked it this way.
I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's not anything that like they're trying to do the song from the album. It's just like they're just having a fun little jam.
I think Gary's had more fun than anybody else. He's all over the place with this. Well, his little fingers must have been just really popping those. It sounds really nice the way that sounds.
Now you met Gary, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever just shake his hand and see what kind of a grip he had?
He had really long, slender fingers, so and the bass was a long, slender neck bass.
Mm. Interesting.
And I've seen him play.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some live footage, but that's live footage never really compares to being there and seeing it in person.
He and Trevor had very different hands. Trevor had stubbier fingers, shorter, fatter, but I think he pulled harder.
Mm.
Gary was taller and lankier, and I think he had more slender build, but I think his fingers were much longer and slender.
Well, and that's always healthy for a bass player to have long fingers because those frets are so wide.
But he played it like a guitar,
mm-hmm.
all over the place.
Right. Well, and that was that. Interesting that I didn't pick up on this earlier. I was talking about how Gary was playing a little off the beat with that sort of reggae feel, but Ken was there at the end too.
I was doing it too. Yeah. Nice touch.
Yeah, I like the feel of that. And I'll have to go back and listen to the album because now I'm starting to wonder, was the album played that way and I didn't notice it either?
This is over.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a nice little version of it. I mean, of course, I'm sitting here going, play the whole song, and I know they're not going to, but this is a nice little interlude too, probably for them to just take a little bit of a break, have a little fun with the crowd, and get back into, well, I guess depending on what the actual placement was. But this sounds like it was towards the end of the concert because David's saying, he starts off saying, "Do you guys want some more?" And usually you do that towards the end.
I think they left and came back.
Oh, as an encore? Yeah, that could be.
I think and if they came back and he did this just to get the restarted, then it's a great way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, a very cool song, our shortest one on the season, but a very enjoyable little interlude, I have to say. Thanks, Dave, for hanging on for this little one and coming on and talking about the websites too. I mean, they're so valuable to fans. Pretty much everything you want to know is there. And if it's not, I'm sure it will be at some point.
Well, thank you, Scott. It was a pleasure to be here again.
As always, we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Magicians Podcast. In the meantime, stay cool. And thank you, Dave.
Yeah, see that.
Cheers. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magicians Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!